There comes a quiet moment, often in the bathroom mirror or in the glance of an old photo, when you suddenly feel like a stranger to your own face. It's not about aging. It's not just about wrinkles, hair thinning, or sagging skin. It's something stranger, subtler. You look into your own eyes and sense something has shifted, something deeper than biology. You aren't entirely who you were. This is not vanity. This is not midlife crisis. This is the beginning of spiritual awakening, and your body, as Terence McKenna once suggested, is trying to keep up with your expanding consciousness. As your interior self evolves, your exterior begins to subtly reflect that evolution, and the misalignment becomes momentarily visible. It's unsettling, but it's a sign of growth. McKenna often spoke of the body as a linguistic object, shaped not only by genes, but by information, belief, and culture. He believed that when consciousness begins to break free from the psychic constraints of a programmed society, consumerism, productivity, superficial roles, the body follows. But unlike the mind, which can shift quickly with insight or experience, the body changes in slow, often perplexing ways. That mismatch between who you were and who you are becoming is often first felt in your appearance. Have you noticed your eyes becoming more intense, more expressive, even when you're not trying? Or perhaps your posture has changed, unprompted, as if your body wants to carry you differently. These aren't coincidences. They are embodied signals that something within you is waking up. People in midlife are especially prone to these experiences. Why? Because you've lived long enough to carry not just the expectations of others, but also the residue of those identities. Careers, marriages, roles, they shape how you hold your face, how you smile, how you move. When a spiritual awakening begins to dismantle these layers, the body must renegotiate its form. You may suddenly feel like your smile is forced. Your voice sounds unfamiliar. You dress a certain way, but it no longer feels like you. These small dissonances are the surface-level ripples of a much deeper inner shift. McKenna once said that the body is the hardware of the soul, and when the soul upgrades its software through expanded awareness, emotional healing, or psychedelic insight, the hardware needs time to realign. This can be confusing, especially in a society that sees physical change only through the lens of illness or aesthetics. But what if your body is simply adjusting to carry the new self you are becoming? If this reflection has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments. What part spoke to you the most? Now let's continue. One of the first and most disorienting signs of a spiritual awakening, particularly as seen through the lens of Terence McKenna, is the slow unraveling of the face you've worn for decades. Not the literal features, but the socially programmed mask we unconsciously develop to function in a culture that often feels spiritually disconnected. Think back. How many times have you smiled when you didn't feel joy, furrowed your brow in agreement, even as your intuition rebelled? How often have you mirrored what others expected, in tone, in gaze, in micro-expressions, just to survive the day? Over time, that becomes muscle memory, and that muscle memory begins to etch itself into your appearance. McKenna believed culture is not your friend. He saw mainstream society as an elaborate dream, kept alive by repetition and social conformity. When awakening begins, you start withdrawing your participation from that dream. Your facial expressions soften or grow more neutral. You may stop over-smiling. You might even look more serious to others, not because you're unhappy, but because you're no longer performing. This shift can be misread by friends or family as coldness, but in truth it's a return to authenticity. You're not masking anymore. There's an inner relaxation that comes with this. Many report their faces feeling lighter, or notice tension leaving their jaw, neck, and forehead. The muscles that once held false agreement or suppressed emotion are no longer needed. In their place, something raw emerges, a quieter, more honest presence. Not everyone will understand it, but you will feel it. And here's the paradox. As your face becomes less performative, people may say you look older, tired, or even different. In Western culture, we often associate youth with emotional compliance, big smiles, wide eyes, agreeable expressions. But true spiritual maturity reclaims a deeper beauty, the beauty of presence, stillness, and depth. McKenna warned of mistaking the artificial for the authentic. He challenged people to question how much of their identity was culturally installed. Your face, in many ways, is a map of those installations, but as you begin to step into a more conscious version of yourself, the old map fades. What emerges might be unfamiliar, even to you. And yet it's more you than anything before. This can be frightening. You may look in the mirror and feel exposed, vulnerable, even off. But remember, the process of awakening is not about becoming more palatable to others. It's about becoming more honest with yourself. Your body, your face, is simply catching up with your inner truth. This isn't degeneration, it's liberation. McKenna spoke often about the courage required to face truth without turning away. As you reclaim your face from the collective performance, you're taking one of the most radical steps on that path. There's a peculiar experience many people report during spiritual awakening, a sudden sensitivity in the skin. Not just in terms of touch, though that can happen, but also in how the skin seems to respond emotionally. It flushes more easily. It feels too tight or too loose. It tingles at odd times. You may find yourself more sensitive to temperature, fabrics, or even certain cosmetics you've used for years. This isn't a skin condition, it's a symptom of transformation. Terence McKenna often spoke of the body as a biological interface between the self and the world. When consciousness begins to evolve, whether through meditation, psychedelics, or deep inner work, the body's role as a boundary becomes more fluid. The skin, being our outermost barrier, is where that dance becomes most obvious. In many traditions, skin shedding is a metaphor for rebirth. Snakes, for example, release old skin as they grow. The process is often uncomfortable, and for us humans it can manifest as sensitivity, irritation, or a vague feeling of not quite fitting into your own body. These are not signs of illness, though of course any new symptoms should always be approached with care. But in the context of awakening, there are often signs that the old self is being released. In midlife, this can feel particularly intense. The skin already begins to change in texture and elasticity, but when a spiritual awakening overlays that natural process, it amplifies the sensation of departure, as if you're no longer wearing the identity you've outgrown. You may look at your hands or face and feel detached, not in a disassociative way, but in a quietly curious one. Who is this person I've become? McKenna would say this is the moment when the ego cocoon begins to split. The protective layers built from cultural beliefs, emotional survival strategies, and inherited roles start to break apart. And the skin, being our literal outer layer, reflects that process symbolically and somatically. Some begin to care less about their appearance, not out of apathy, but from a deeper reorientation of values. Others become more attuned to skincare, not for vanity, but because touch and self-contact take on a sacred quality. Washing the face becomes an act of presence. Applying lotion becomes a quiet ritual of re-embodiment. The skin remembers. It carries the weight of identity, both yours and the one others imposed on you. When that begins to release, it can feel strange, even alien. But underneath that confusion lies something essential. Your emergence into a version of yourself not dictated by culture, but by consciousness. McKenna invited us to view the body as a teacher, not a prison. And the skin, though often ignored in spiritual conversations, is one of its most eloquent messengers. If it's changing, it's speaking. And if you're willing to listen, you may hear the subtle whisper of your own becoming. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but during a spiritual awakening they become more like mirrors, constantly reflecting the shifting terrain within you. People might start to notice it before you do. Your eyes look different. There's something in your gaze. You seem more intense lately. This isn't something you can force. It's not about learning to look spiritual. It's something that emerges naturally as inner perception deepens. The eyes, in their stillness, clarity, and even their fatigue, start to communicate a truth you can no longer hide. Terence McKenna believed that language itself would one day be replaced by more direct forms of knowing, what he called visible language. In that vision, the body would radiate meaning in a way far more efficient and honest than speech. In many ways, This is already happening through the eyes. As you awaken, you begin to perceive not just the world differently, but yourself and others. This altered perception reshapes the very light your eyes seem to carry. It's not about brightness or beauty, it's about presence. Your gaze may become steadier. You may feel less need to look away in conversations. You start seeing through surface behaviors, spotting contradictions or emotional patterns more easily. The world begins to appear less like a stage and more like a dream you're waking up inside of. And that understanding changes how your eyes rest in your face, how they meet others, and how they receive light. Interestingly, many people in the midst of this transformation report seeing more vivid colors, noticing small details they used to ignore, or feeling overwhelmed by visual information in crowds or overstimulating environments. That's not a defect. It's a sign that your perceptual filters are loosening. The default mode of ignoring the subtle and favoring the obvious is breaking down. This too shows up in your expression. Your eyes, once trained to look for threats or social approval, begin to rest in awareness. Not passivity, awareness. That shift in visual orientation, from scanning to witnessing, carries a profound ripple effect. You'll likely notice more beauty in small things, trees, shadows, hands. And simultaneously, you might feel pain when you see unconsciousness in others, in systems, in your own past actions. That's the double-edged clarity of awakening. For McKenna, consciousness was always tied to beauty and novelty. The more awake we become, the more we are drawn toward the new, the true, the real. And the eyes, long enslaved by social performance and distraction, begin to point us toward that orientation. They search less for reassurance and more for resonance. To those around you, this can be startling. You may be told you're staring or more intense, but what's really happening is that you're no longer looking through the lens of egoic survival. You're seeing life unfiltered, and your eyes are now the first to reveal that evolution. Have you noticed yourself standing differently lately, without even trying? A shift in how you carry your shoulders, how you sit, how you walk. It may feel like your body is either trying to open itself up or fold in and protect something tender. Posture, long dismissed as a mechanical issue, is in fact one of the most visible markers of internal transformation. During spiritual awakening, the body begins to renegotiate how it exists in space. Terence McKenna believed that consciousness and embodiment are not separate, that the way we hold ourselves physically reflects how we perceive reality. As your internal world expands, reorganizes, and reclaims itself from decades of conditioning, your posture starts to change to match that evolution. For decades, many of us have walked through life with functional posture, a way of holding the body that reflects our roles: the caregiver, the professional, the obedient student, the pleaser. These roles teach us to make ourselves smaller, quieter, more palatable. Shoulders round forward, the chest subtly collapses, the spine curves, not from age, but from resignation. But when awakening begins, a kind of interior honesty starts to surface. The old roles begin to lose their grip, and with them the posture they once demanded. You may find yourself sitting more upright, not from discipline, but from some inner force saying, "I don't need to shrink anymore." This shift can feel foreign, even uncomfortable. A new awareness of your spine, your breath, your body in the chair. Some people feel temporary stiffness or aches, not from injury but from unused muscles reactivating. It's like the body has been in a costume for years, and now bare and unadorned, it must learn to stand on its own. McKenna spoke often of the body as an explorer, a partner in consciousness, not just a container. Postural change, from his perspective, is not cosmetic, it's evolutionary. As you begin to shed psychic tension, the muscles that held those tensions start to let go. This can also bring up old emotions stored in the body. Tears may come unexpectedly. A simple stretch can open up decades of suppressed feeling. This is not weakness, it's release. For those in midlife, this experience carries particular weight. You may have spent 30, 40, even 50 years adapting your body to fit roles that no longer serve you. Now in the quiet moments, you feel a whisper rising from within. Stand how you were meant to stand. Walk how you were meant to walk. not in arrogance but in alignment, and people notice. They may say you look more confident or more grounded. What they're really seeing is the end of an unconscious performance. You're no longer posturing for acceptance, you're posturing for truth. McKenna once said that to truly evolve, we must let go of the lies we told ourselves to survive. Posture is one of those lies, and when it begins to unravel, the body becomes not just freer, but more whole. It might seem superficial at first, a sudden change in your hair's texture, color, thickness, or growth patterns. Or perhaps more dramatic, premature graying, hair loss, or an urge to cut it all off. But hair, from both a biological and symbolic standpoint, is deeply tied to identity and transition. And during spiritual awakening, it often becomes an unexpected mirror of inner transformation. In many cultures, hair holds power. Monks shave their heads to symbolize ego death. People going through major life transitions often change their hairstyle instinctively. And biologically, hair is highly responsive to stress, emotional trauma, and hormonal shifts, all of which intensify during awakening. For Terence McKenna, these changes weren't just physical responses. They were metaphysical indicators, signs that something deeper was being reconfigured in the human system. When you begin to wake up spiritually, your endocrine system, which governs hormones, often starts to recalibrate. This doesn't always happen in a way that doctors can explain. It's not about disease, it's about rebalancing. The body, in its effort to support a new consciousness, sometimes alters how it produces and distributes its own energy. And since hair is extremely sensitive to hormonal shifts, it often reflects those internal tides. For people in midlife, this is especially nuanced. You're already facing biological changes, menopause, andropause, thyroid fluctuations. But when layered with spiritual awakening, these physical experiences take on deeper meaning. That sudden silver streak in your hair may no longer feel like decay, but like wisdom made visible. Hair thinning might feel less like loss and more like the shedding of layers that no longer serve your evolution. And then there's the symbolic urge to cut it all off. This impulse, especially common among those in deep inner transition, is not vanity, it's ritual. Whether conscious or not, it's a gesture of release, a severing of the past self, the performative identity, the strands that once helped you fit in. It's a rebirth. McKenna saw the human being as a multidimensional organism, not just physical, but vibrational. Hair in many ways serves as both an antenna and an archive. It stores energy, memory, and emotion. It grows silently while we sleep, absorbing our lives strand by strand. When the self is reborn through awakening, it's no wonder that hair changes. It must. Some people begin to treat their hair more gently, switching to natural products, avoiding heat, honoring its rhythms. Others let it grow wildly, no longer constrained by social codes. Both responses are valid. What matters is that the relationship with your own appearance begins to shift from control to communion. You stop manipulating how you look to be accepted. You begin listening to how your body wants to express who you are now. As McKenna might say, these changes are not anomalies. They are signs that you are stepping out of consensus reality and into your own deeper myth. There comes a point in the process of spiritual awakening, especially for those over 45, when you realize that you have become, in some subtle yet undeniable way, unrecognizable, not to everyone, and not in dramatic, theatrical terms, but to yourself, in quiet moments, in photographs, in your voice, in how others react to your presence. Something has changed. It's not just the face, the skin, or the posture. It's not just aging. It's that the person you were, the one who lived to fulfill roles, expectations, and unspoken contracts, no longer sits behind your eyes. A deeper self has taken the seat, and that change is visible. Terence McKenna believed that we are meant to evolve far beyond the consensus version of the human being. He saw culture as a dampening field, keeping people in a state of psychic sleep. And awakening, by definition, is disruptive to the psyche, yes, but also to the body. Because once your inner frequency rises, your outer expression can't help but shift with it. People may comment that you seem calmer, wiser, or different, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with confusion. You may no longer laugh as easily at surface-level things. You may speak slower, or not speak at all when you once would have filled the silence. These aren't symptoms of depression or withdrawal. They are the signs of a nervous system learning how to exist outside of performance. When the soul takes up more space within you, the false identities you wore begin to fall away. And their departure shows up physically. A new gaze, a softened jaw, a quieter energy that people either feel drawn to or strangely repelled by. This is part of what McKenna described as the invisible revolution, when the interior world becomes so potent that it begins to overwrite the scripts written by culture. And yes, and some will not understand. Friends might pull away. Family might say you've changed. But as painful as that can be, it's also a sign that your appearance is no longer filtered through the lens of belonging. You are no longer trying to make others comfortable with your presence. You are living in truth. And truth has its own geometry, its own gravity, its own face. This isn't about perfection. You will still have flaws, regrets, bad days. But you will also feel increasingly incapable of going back to who you were. Not out of rejection, but out of realization. That self was a costume, and now your body is learning to be without one. McKenna encouraged us to question the nature of reality, and your changing appearance is part of that question. What is the real you? Who decides what you should look like, act like, feel like? The more you ask, the more the old self dissolves, and from that dissolution something radiant begins to emerge. Not louder, not younger, not trendier, just truer. And in the end, that truth, once awakened, can never be hidden again.